On a brisk autumn evening in 1953, the nation tuned in to what they believed would be another polished television special, a showcase of Hollywood's finest, complete with elegant gowns, witty banter, and carefully staged performances. Instead, viewers witnessed a moment that shattered conventions, a tense, off-script exchange that slipped through the network's quality control, exposing raw emotion and an unguarded confession from Dana Andrews. Within hours, the actor's once untouchable reputation lay in ruins. That hidden TV interview, now unearthed in forgotten kinescope archives, ended his career almost overnight. And what it revealed about fame, fear, and the fragility of Hollywood stardom remains startlingly relevant. Andrews had risen to prominence nearly a decade earlier, commanding the screen in films like Laura and The Best Years of Our Lives. His tall, unwavering gaze and commanding presence embodied the post-war hero, steady, dependable, and unflinchingly American. Studios cultivated that image relentlessly, choreographing each public appearance to reinforce his on-screen persona. But when the network booked him for a primetime hour, delicate negotiations ensured only the most flattering segments would air. Set tours, lighthearted anecdotes about co-stars, and rehearsed promotions for upcoming pictures. The interview was meant to cement his status as a leading man beyond the silver screen, a carefully controlled chance to charm TV audiences as he had charmed filmgoers. What the network didn't anticipate was a recording glitch, a misaligned reel that streaked past scripted questions and into the raw footage stored in a backroom vault. There, Andrews leaned into the microphone, eyes haunted, and began speaking frankly about the toll Hollywood had taken on him. He talked of crippling self-doubt during long shoots, of studio heads who dismissed actors as disposable commodities, and of nights he cried alone in his trailer, fearing he had no talent beyond the mask of a patriotic husband or wounded veteran. His voice cracked when he admitted, "I don't even recognize the man I play on screen." No laugh track followed. No canned applause. Instead, an editor's note scratched in the margin, "Too real. Bury this." For decades, that reel lay hidden behind a lock-marked, top secret, talent recordings. It was considered too volatile, too revealing, and too dangerous for public consumption. The studio feared backlash. Audiences might reject a star who admitted anxiety or vulnerability. Sponsors might withdraw support, and the carefully constructed glamour of the golden age could shatter. So the footage remained sealed, a scandal waiting beneath layers of celluloid and corporate discretion. Meanwhile, Andrews continued on, delivering performances measured and assured, as if his near ruin had never occurred. Then, in 1978, a curious archivist rediscovered the reel while cataloging film prints donated to a public museum. The tape's label served as a riddle. Andrews, uncut thoughts. Intrigued, she transferred the kinescope to a modern format, expecting a half-minute of idle banter. Instead, she found 20 minutes of candid monologue, a confessional so unfiltered that it rivaled any star's worst nightmare. News of the find reached a veteran journalist, who arranged to preview the footage under strict embargo. The moment he watched Andrews weep at the idea of obsolescence, he realized he held a piece of Hollywood history that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about stardom. When the journalist's expose hit the stands, readers were riveted. Columns dissected every nuance. Andrews' reference to chewing scenery to stay employed, his laughter-steeped apology to fans for any disappointment, and his plea, "Please, let me be more than just a picture in a frame." The industry recoiled. Within days, syndication deals for Andrews' classic films were canceled, television networks shelved reruns, and invitations to conventions and galas vanished. He received private condolence calls from colleagues, but watched as the public distanced itself from a man who dared to expose his humanity. What made the interview so devastating wasn't a scandalous rumor or moral failing, but the sheer authenticity that contradicted the carefully maintained illusion of celebrity. The hidden reel showed that beneath the debonair veneer lay an actor besieged by fear. Fear of being irrelevant, of being typecast, and of being forgotten. In an industry built on idealized fantasies, that kind of vulnerability was unforgivable. The empire of make-believe demanded unwavering confidence and invulnerability, not tear-streaked admissions of insecurity. Today, the uncut interview offers a cautionary tale about the price of authenticity in a world that prefers polished illusions. It reminds us that even icons can crack, and that behind every glamorous facade may lie hidden reels of doubt. As we stream Andrews's films and read accounts of how the secret tape was buried for a quarter century, we confront our own complicity in elevating perfection and ignoring imperfection. The hidden interview lives on not just as a relic of Hollywood's golden sin of censorship, but as a mirror reflecting our collective fear of seeing the humanity behind fame. Immediately after the expose hit newsstands, the tide of public opinion turned sharply against Dana Andrews. Overnight, fans who had once admired his stoic handsomeness now recoiled at his candid admission of fear, almost as if vulnerability were contagious. Radio stations that aired adaptations of his films dropped features citing audience feedback as reasoning. Cinema clubs deleted his classic noir thrillers from retrospective rosters, fearful that his perceived weakness would erode the art form's mystique. Advertisers withdrew sponsorships from shows touting his image as a flawless hero, citing brand alignment concerns. It was a swift reversal, a stark demonstration of how quickly fame can fracture when illusion meets exposed humanity. Inside studio backlots, executives scrambled to contain the fallout. Memo chains directed press offices to issue statements lamenting Andrews's inadvertent misstep and reaffirming commitment to upholding our beloved image of silver screen ideals. Yet even the most guarded memos could not suppress the leaked transcript or the burgeoning public fascination with the unvarnished footage. Newspapers ran side-by-side stills from the hidden interview alongside colorized promotional photos of Andrews smiling. Editorials pondered whether stars should be allowed moments of off-camera authenticity or whether the machinery of stardom demanded perpetual simulation. In Los Angeles bars, young actors sobered by the scandal crowded around televisions set to endless reruns of the interview. Some whispered, "He's human, too," clutching whiskey glasses as if bracing for a confession of their own. Others scoffed, "I thought weakness made him relatable. Now he's just a cautionary tale." Their debate echoed the same question studios feared. Can authenticity and myth ever coexist on the same marquee? Meanwhile, Dana Andrews, sequestered in his Beverly Hills home, faced a harrowing reckoning. Once accustomed to autographs and applause, he now answered only sympathetic phone calls from friends urging him to reclaim his narrative. Pride waged war with vulnerability as he crafted a public letter acknowledging the interview's pain, yet insisting on the courage it took to speak truth. The letter offered neither excuses nor drama. It was a bare-bones appeal for grace in an unforgiving spotlight. Critics dissected every word, debating whether Andrews's apology restored his dignity or merely prolonged the spectacle. Film historians noted the paradox. An artist could be talented and truthful, yet still deemed career-ending by a culture unprepared for personal admission. In academic journals, essays compared Andrews's plight to modern debates over social media authenticity, asking how many today risk professional ruin for the sake of transparency. As weeks passed, his name perched on obituaries and retrospective articles that once felt premature. Producers ceased advocating for his comeback, deeming the aura of vulnerability too volatile for mainstream revival. Independent filmmakers pitched biopics exploring behind-the-scenes studio pressures, but funding vanished when investors doubted audiences wanted another Hollywood confessional. Only niche streaming services embraced his story, commissioning short documentaries that traced his meteoric fall and pondered the price of breaking character. Their viewership, though passionate, reached a fraction of the mass market that once clamored for his studio pictures, underscoring how irrevocable his decline had become. And still, in film schools, instructors taught the hidden interview as a cautionary example of narrative control. Clips played between reels devoted to star studies, highlighting how an actor's off-script voice could eclipse a lifetime of careful image management. They warned students that fame's safe harbor was built on illusion, and any passenger daring to expose the hull risked sinking both ship and career. Yet whispers of admiration persisted. Some respected the raw courage, arguing Andrews had lit a path for future generations to follow. In hushed corners of film festivals, roundtables debated whether authenticity could ever be rehabilitated into the mainstream. Could the industry learn to value truth alongside star power? Or were perfection and poise the only currency that truly mattered? Yet the question hangs in the air. Will the industry ever reconcile fame and authenticity? As studios rebuild their faith in risk, a new era will dawn, one honoring the complex tapestry of human emotions behind each performance. Haunting and instructive. Until then, Andrews' hidden interview always endures as a testament to the formidable power of truth in a world devoted to illusion in our culture today. The fallout from the hidden interview rippled far beyond Hollywood's backlots, striking at the heart of mid-century America's ideal of unflappable stardom. In living rooms across the country, families paused before their television sets, rewinding segments of Andrews' candid admission with growing disbelief. The strong, silent leading man who once embodied confidence now appeared vulnerable and unsure, qualities that audiences had been taught to admire on screen, but to repress off it. Letters poured into fan clubs, both condemning and consoling. "We bought tickets to see a hero," one wrote, "not a man who doubts his worth." Another pleaded, "If he's broken, let us help him heal." But when a studio publicist tallied the responses, the verdict was clear. The majority wanted distance, not empathy. During the next awards season, Andrews noticed a conspicuous absence of invitations. Sidelined from his usual red carpet circuit, he watched peers accept accolades for performances that, in their sanitized glory, reinforced the very illusion he had shattered. Columnists speculated that awards committees feared granting honors to someone whose off-screen authenticity contradicted the crafted persona they were supposed to celebrate. A late-night television host joked that Andrews has lost his shot at an Oscar because his private fears struck a different chord than the Academy's gold statue. The quip stung, but it also underscored the industry's unwillingness to reconcile courage with career advancement. Rejected by A-list producers, Andrews retreated to smaller, independent films, a realm where budgets were modest and creative control limited. Directors welcomed him as a cautionary talisman, someone whose mere presence carried a lesson in image management. He took roles in courtroom dramas and morality tales that mirrored his own plunge from grace. In one such film, he portrayed an embattled newspaperman silenced for uncovering a scandal, a meta-narrative that critics called hauntingly autobiographical. While the performance earned respectful nods at art house festivals, it never translated into mainstream success. Box office returns remained sparse, and studio doors stayed firmly closed. As funding for his projects dried up, Andrews found sanctuary in the theater. Regional playhouses, far from Hollywood's glare, cast him as complex characters, disillusioned lovers, broken soldiers, conflicted fathers, roles demanding emotional rawness that he now wielded with painful authenticity. Audiences in Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, and Vancouver witnessed his gift for channeling regret and hope in equal measure. Local critics lauded the veteran actor's bravery, claiming that no one embodied the anguish of broken illusions better. Yet despite applause in these intimate venues, the broader entertainment landscape retained its skepticism, unwilling to forgive the man who had torn open the curtain. At home, Andrews grappled with isolation. His Beverly Hills abode, once a scene of silver-screen soirees, became a quiet refuge. He pored over stacks of script pages, hoping to discover a part that would reignite his career, but few screenwriters wrote roles for fallen idols. His wife and children provided comfort, but even they could not erase the sting of being deemed too human for the screen. He began keeping a journal chronicling each audition rejection, each headline that cast his honesty as recklessness. In its pages, he asked himself whether the price he paid for speaking truth had been unfairly high, or whether his confession had simply exposed a flaw Hollywood refused to admit in itself. Meanwhile, the hidden interview took on a life of its own. Columbia Pictures, fearing that the scandal could resurface, attempted to bury any mention of it in trade publications. Yet historians and archivists, sensing its importance, began referencing it obliquely in academic papers. Film scholars likened the interview to a cinematic, lost scene, an alternate take that offered insight into an actor's psyche the final film had omitted. At university symposiums, professors screened subclipped excerpts to demonstrate how star images are manufactured and policed. Andrews' monologue became central to courses on celebrity studies, a case study in the unforgiving calculus of fame. By the late 1960s, Hollywood's shining veneer had shown cracks of its own. New voices demanded authenticity in art and politics. The studio system crumbled. Method actors heralded personal truth over polished performance. In this shifting environment, a younger generation rediscovered Andrews's hidden interview as a pioneering act of vulnerability. A revival screening of The Best Years of Our Lives featured an introduction by a rising film critic who argued that Andrews's candid confession foreshadowed the cultural revolutions about to sweep the nation. Suddenly, his career-ending moment came to resemble a prophetic stand for self-expression rather than a misstep. Encouraged by this reappraisal, Andrews's family and representatives lobbied a major cable network to produce a documentary exploring his life and the buried interview. Tentative at first, the network agreed, commissioning interviews with surviving co-stars, crew members, and historians. When the hour-long special aired, viewers saw footage of Andrews at work, juxtaposed with select portions of the hidden reel. His voice, once condemned as too raw, now resonated as a courageous admission in an industry long overdue for reform. Social media, though in its infancy compared to modern platforms, buzzed with praise from cinephiles and pop culture nostalgists. Younger fans streamed his classic films in a retro renaissance of black and white Hollywood. At a retrospective screening, Andrews himself, now in his 70s, spoke to a packed theater. He thanked the audience for rediscovering him, then addressed the hidden interview directly. "I spoke my truth when I was scared," he said, voice steady. "It cost me everything, but it also set me free." His confession, once a career killer, had reshaped his legacy into one of resilience and integrity. As the final credits rolled, the crowd rose in a prolonged standing ovation, celebrating not only the films on screen, but the man who dared to risk his image for honesty. Even after that televised renaissance, Dana Andrews found that his journey was far from over. The documentary's final credits had rolled over black and white clips of his most iconic roles, yet the hidden interview remained the defining moment, an unvarnished glimpse beneath the star-studded surface. In the weeks that followed, festival programmers approached him with revival screenings, inviting him to introduce classics like Laura and The Best Years of Our Lives. Yet Andrews, now in his 70s, was careful not to reduce his newfound acceptance to mere nostalgia. He chose projects that reflected his hard-won perspective, seeking roles in films and plays exploring redemption, resilience, and the complexity of survival in unforgiving worlds, subjects he knew intimately. Audiences packed art house cinemas to hear his own reflections before midnight showings. He spoke of the weight of expectation, admitting that for decades he had worn the hero's mask so tightly it nearly strangled his sense of self. Now, he embraced vulnerability as a gift rather than a liability. At Q&A sessions, he recounted the day the vault tape had surfaced, how fear had kept him silent for a quarter century, and how the risk of speaking truth eventually reclaimed his voice. Viewers hung on every word, witnessing a man who had been undone by honesty only to be reborn by it. Behind the scenes, archivists expedited the restoration of the interview footage, working frame by frame to remove scratches and audio hiss. The updated version streamed on digital platforms, accompanied by contextual essays and oral histories. Film scholars praised the curatorial effort, arguing that presenting it alongside behind-the-scenes materials created a fuller portrait of Andrews's career and character. Online libraries curated playlists pairing his studio-era clips with excerpts of the hidden monologue, encouraging next-generation cinephiles to contrast performance and person. Universities integrated these materials into courses not only on film history, but on psychology and media ethics, demonstrating how empathy and critique could coexist in a single narrative. Meanwhile, the actor's personal life blossomed in unexpected ways. Long estranged from some former co-stars and studio executives, Andrews sent letters of reconciliation to those he had once felt betrayed him. He hosted intimate dinners at his home where movie legends and rising talents gathered, sharing stories of ambition and self-doubt over home-cooked meals. Colleagues marveled at his generosity. He opened his archives to collaborators, offering scripts, photos, and candid interviews to filmmakers exploring mid-century Hollywood's hidden corners. His trademark reserve gave way to warmth, and he found joy mentoring young actors seeking permission to show their own imperfections. Not everyone embraced this shift. A handful of critics insisted that Andrews's post-scandal revival risked overshadowing his film's artistic merits with personal melodrama. They warned of trauma porn, suggesting that audiences might prioritize personal confession over cinematic craft. Andrews responded gently, acknowledging that sensationalism could be a trap, but maintained that art and authenticity were intertwined. He urged viewers to see the hidden interview not as spectacle, but as a testament to the human impulse to speak truth, even when the stakes seem insurmountable. His partnership with a boutique streaming service resulted in a short film anthology called Echoes of Truth, in which contemporary directors adapted scenes from his hidden interview into fictional vignettes. One segment imagined the rogue network engineer who first misthreaded the reel, dramatizing the moment that altered Andrews's fate. Another focused on a studio executive's moral crisis upon discovering the tape. These films premiered at Sundance and Cannes sidebar events, extending Andrews's legacy into new artistic realms. He attended each screening, offering gracious commentary that emphasized collaboration over ego, again underscoring his belief that vulnerability could be an engine for creative growth. Perhaps the most surprising development was a revival stage play in Chicago that wove the hidden interview into its narrative. Playwrights had created a meta-theatrical piece where the audience served as a jury deliberating whether Andrews's honesty was heroic or hubristic. They used verbatim lines from the tape as dialogue, inviting real-time votes on the character's fate. The production sold out for months, igniting debates on newspapers' editorial pages and talk radio programs about forgiveness and the fragility of fame. Through it all, Andrews attended one performance, standing in the back as the jury's verdict oscillated between condemnation and compassion. When the curtain fell, he rose to his feet, tears in his eyes, and accepted a standing ovation that celebrated a life reclaimed through courage. In the end, Dana Andrews' career did not resume the unbroken trajectory it might once have followed. Instead, it took on richer contours shaped by adversity and redemption. The hidden interview that had once toppled his stardom became the cornerstone of a legacy rooted in honesty, resilience, and the belief that true artistry emerges from the willingness to reveal one's own edges. His final act was not a flawless performance under bright lights, but a gentle invitation to remember that the most compelling stories are those that confront our shared fears and foster the grace to forgive. It'd be why the time Dana Andrews stepped forward to accept the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Centennial Gala. His journey felt both improbable and inevitable. A 50-year career that had begun with silent screen tests and Technicolor starbursts had been derailed by one unguarded moment, and then reborn through sheer courage. The gala hall, draped in memorabilia from Hollywood's golden age, fell silent as he mounted the stage, not in a tailored tuxedo, but in a simple black jacket with no bow tie, a deliberate nod to his willingness to shed artifice. The applause that followed was thunderous and deeply personal, each clap acknowledging the actor who had dared to humanize stardom by exposing his own doubts. Behind the scenes, the Andrews family had spent weeks preparing for this night. His granddaughter, now a museum curator, had helped design the onstage exhibit of props and scripts, weaving the hidden interview into a larger narrative of resilience. Andrews' wife arranged for a montage of letters from fans who wrote of how that buried confession had inspired them to mend broken relationships. When the montage flickered across the big screen, Dana paused, tears in his eyes, as memories of those early days on backlit sets collided with the hush of his secret monologue. For the first time, he felt that the hidden tape no longer defined him but completed him, filling the gaps between the hero roles and the raw humanity he'd always carried inside. Shortly after the gala, the Dana Andrews Foundation was launched to nurture emerging actors from underrepresented communities. The foundation's first fellowship awarded workshops in acting, screenwriting, and archival research, pairing fellows with veteran mentors who emphasized authenticity over perfection. One inaugural fellow, a young performer from Detroit, credited Andrews' candor with giving her permission to risk vulnerability on stage. "He showed me that truth is the finest talent we possess," she said, her voice trembling on the foundation's website. Over the next year, dozens of applicants cited Andrews' hidden interview as the spark that ignited their creative journeys. Digital archivists, inspired by the response to the restored kinescope, unveiled an interactive Andrews archive online. Users could navigate a virtual recreation of the Paramount backlit, opening doors to rehearsal footage, personal diaries, and audio annotations. A side menu offered truth tracks, snippets of the famed interview juxtaposed with clips from the best years of our lives and Laura. One entry allowed visitors to toggle between the on-screen performance of a heroic monologue and a candid reel where Andrews confessed, "I don't recognize the man I play." Scholars hailed the interface as a breakthrough in media studies, demonstrating how context can deepen our understanding of craft and character. Within weeks, the archive drew hundreds of thousands of visitors, each click a testament to the enduring power of story and sincerity. On university campuses, courses ranging from film ethics to media psychology integrated the interview into their syllabi. Students analyzed how corporate interests had once buried Andrews's confession, comparing it to contemporary debates over deplatforming and legacy content. Debate teams argued that studios owed a duty of care to performers' private recordings, while seminars explored the moral complexities of posthumous releases. A graduate student even proposed a doctoral thesis titled "The Confessional Screen: Vulnerability as Cultural Currency in Hollywood." In symposiums and poster sessions, the hidden interview became a touchstone for examining the relationship between public persona and private pain, reminding emerging scholars that every piece of media carries echoes of real lives behind the lens. Meanwhile, a streaming platform commissioned a mini-series called Echoes of the Backlit, dramatizing key moments from Andrews's career, his screen test for the best years of our lives, the day he first watched the hidden reel, and the studio boardroom meetings that decided its fate. Each episode wove archival footage with scripted scenes, blending documentary authenticity with narrative flair. Andrews agreed to narrate introductions from his home library, his voice steady as he reflected on choices made under pressure. Critics praised the series for balancing respect with revelation, lauding it as a template for how legacy content can find new audiences. Subscribers binged the episodes, posting reaction videos in real time and sparking fresh conversations about the cost of breaking character. In the independent theater world, dozens of small companies produced staged readings of Andrews's hidden interview. Actors took turns voicing passages of the monologue, accompanied by minimalist lighting that echoed the original backlit rehearsal. After each performance, the cast and audience shared their own stories of regret and reconciliation, transforming every production into a communal ritual. Directors spoke of how the raw text invited participants to become co-creators of empathy, erasing the boundary between star and spectator. When one touring company performed in a community center in rural Kentucky, a local newspaper reported that residents lingered afterward, forming small circles to share regrets that had long gone unspoken, inspired by the man who had dared to lament his own fears on camera. Throughout these developments, Dana Andrews remained a humble presence. He declined big-budget biopics and blockbuster retellings, insisting that his story belonged to the public archive rather than studio vaults. Instead, he focused on mentoring, appearing at Q&As for revival screenings, and writing essays on the craft of honest performance. In a final published letter, he summed up the lesson of his life. "We build legends to protect ourselves, but it is in our cracks that the light gets in." Those words, now inscribed in plaques at film schools and museums, stand as an enduring reminder that vulnerability can be the strongest bridge to connection. As this fifth chapter of his legacy unfolded, one thing became clear. The hidden interview that once ended Dana Andrews's career had ultimately enriched it beyond measure, inspiring new generations to embrace truth over illusion. And yet, as we approach the final act of his story, one question lingers. How will the industry carry forward this hard-won lesson about the power and peril of authenticity? In the quiet months after the gala, the reverberations of Dana Andrews's long and winding journey continued to reshape attitudes at every level of the entertainment industry. Executive committees at major studios quietly convened to draft new guidelines for posthumous releases and unseen archives. The Stellar Confidentiality Code, as it was informally called, laid out standards for estates to stipulate clear parameters around private recordings, specifying consent directives, contextual annotations, and guest access limitations. A consortium of legal advisors, archivists, and former talent agents formed an advisory board to oversee implementation of vulnerability clauses in talent contracts, clarifying how unscripted moments could be handled if ever disclosed and how estates should manage privacy rights within evolving copyright laws. Archivists embraced the notion of emotive stewardship, highlighting that every private confession carried emotional weight, deserving of careful curation rather than sensational exploitation. Across digital platforms, new repositories emerged dedicated to presenting Andrews's hidden interview alongside immersive materials, 3D script annotations, annotated storyboards, and curated essays by scholars who had studied the fallout and revival. Viewers exploring the Andrews archive could toggle layers of context, clicking footnotes that explain studio pressures, censorship fears, and the social norms of the era. Interactive timelines traced his star rise and dramatic fall, allowing users to appreciate how a single reel of candid monologue shifted a career and set precedents for authenticity. In parallel, streaming services implemented ethics features that required viewers to acknowledge content warnings before accessing raw confession audio, ensuring that audiences engaged with care rather than casual curiosity. Some platforms even offered immersive VR rooms recreating the dimly lit backlit corridor where the tape was discovered, combining sensory cues like ambient machinery hum and faint studio chatter for deeper historical empathy. Film schools worldwide rewrote their curricula to examine the hidden interview as a masterclass in the complex dynamics of celebrity truth. Professors challenged students to compare Andrews's sealed reel with modern-day social media confessions, dissecting the similarities between mid-century gatekeepers and contemporary algorithms shaping personal narratives. Workshop exercises invited aspiring actors to record short personal reflections and then discuss in small groups how honesty shaped audience empathy. Screenwriting professors urged students to conceive characters who straddled the line between myth and vulnerability, inspired by the haunted introspection that had once toppled a star, audience trust forever. Meanwhile, independent creators seized upon the episode as fertile ground for fresh expressions across media. Podcast producers developed multi-episode deep dives weaving interviews with Andrews's surviving contemporaries alongside modern commentary. One series called Unmasked Legends dedicated a season to examining hidden recordings from other icons, tracing fear, censorship, and eventual embrace of truth. Documentary filmmakers produced intimate short films pairing excerpts of the recovered reel with dramatic reenactments of the moments leading up to its rediscovery. Galleries hosted installations where visitors wandered reconstructed backlit corridors, pausing at listening stations that played monologue segments in quiet booths lit by vintage spotlights. Grassroots communities seized upon Andrews's story as a rallying cry for healing. Local cinemas hosted confession nights, inviting attendees to share personal admissions before screenings of his classic films, while community centers held vulnerable voices, open mic events combining songs, poems, and narratives. Mental health organizations reported that his journey helped destigmatize anxiety and self-doubt among creative professionals, inspiring support groups in cities from Melbourne to Montreal. A nonprofit radio station launched a program called After the Frame, where callers recounted regrets in the spirit of the hidden reel, forging empathy and reminding fans speaking truth could build stronger bonds. Celebrity branding evolved rapidly. Public figures in film and music began negotiating personal boundaries and contract writer clauses, specifying what off-camera material they would permit in documentaries or social media clips. Several actors instituted trust circles, assemblies of close confidants who pre-screened candid footage before release, ensuring context and tone were honored. Influencers and reality stars spoke about how Andrews's saga guided them to craft authentic yet respectful personal content, many adopting informal honesty policies for transparency. PR agencies once known for image polish rebranded as persona ethicists, emphasizing sustainable authenticity over fleeting perfection and protecting creative integrity. Indie artists absorbed Dana Andrews' Odyssey and posed one question: how do we honor private truth without reducing it to spectacle? That question echoed in boardrooms, classrooms and community gatherings, sparking workshops on ethical storytelling and panels on archival integrity. Many agreed that balance was key, creating guidelines that support both the right to confess and the right to contextualize, blending transparency with compassion. Andrews's hidden interview stands as a beacon for authenticity, proving that vulnerability can enrich art rather than undermine it. May this lesson guide creators and audiences as we navigate the delicate dance between persona and person.